Okay, so I'm a little late with this one, sure, but who cares? Dead Rising 4 is here, and after returning to the original Willamette earlier this year with the remaster of the first Dead Rising, here's what I think about Dead Rising 4. Oh, and if the footage quality changes at certain points, it's because some of the early stuff was recorded on my old Hopog, and the rest is on my new Elgato that I got for Christmas. Yay! Dead Rising 4 takes place a year after the event of Dead Rising 3 and 16 years after the original Dead Rising. After a failed break-in at a military base, Frank West is branded a war criminal and goes into hiding. Fast forward a few months and Frank finds himself returning to Willamette, which is caught in the middle of another zombie outbreak. At its surface, this is Dead Rising as it's always been. It's a game in which the zombies are really stupid and you have a ton of crazy ways to murder them. At the same time, Dead Rising 4 makes some major changes to the formula, but not for the better. Firstly, the controversial time limit is gone altogether. Survivors don't need to be escorted to a safe location, and other elements that made the original Dead Rising games unique and interesting are nowhere to be found. It really feels like Capcom are taking the Resident Evil approach to the Dead Rising franchise by stripping away all the unique aspects of the franchise in favour of more standardised gameplay. Hell, they even remove psychopaths. Now you just have maniacs who are survivors that fight you armed with combo weapons. Yet despite this, Capcom tried to market Dead Rising 4 as a return to its roots. Frank's back, zombies in Willamette, and you can even go to the mall. The most frustrating part is the focus on Frank West though. It's supposed to be the Frank West you remember from the first one, except he has a different voice, face and personality. So it's not really Dead Rising 1's Frank West, it's a knockoff Frank West made by a child's tiny hand in a sweatshop in some third world country. The Frank West of Dead Rising 1 was an ambitious journalist who found himself serving as the only sane man in an insane situation with two goals in mind: survive and find the truth behind the outbreak. Dead Rising 4 Frank West is a totally different story, a once acclaimed journalist who fell from grace and now seeks to return to his former glory. Now you can say what you want about Nathan Drake's jokey responses after he kills people in Uncharted, but at least he has restraint and timing. Frank West has a sarcastic response to pretty much every conversation to the point where he barely feels like a character in just a poor punchline factory.
Ho flippin' ho!
From a gameplay standard, the inventory has seen some tweaks as well. Frank now has 3 separate weapon wheels for ranged, melee and throwable weapons, while food and other healing items are offhand. So players can equip one of each and swap between them with simple button presses. While it makes swapping between certain weapon types easier, it also removes one of my favourite things about Dead Rising: throwing stupid things at zombies such as chairs or toys. The melee combat feels a little clunky though. Zombies can ignore or just not react at all to your swings, while the range of weapons is often hard to predict and can lead to you swinging at thin air instead of the zombies. It's also hurt by this new health system. Instead of the block system, zombies are likely to swing at you and lower your total hit points. It's frustrating due to how the game tends to spawn large amounts of zombies that quickly swarm you so they can proceed to viciously poke you until you die. Made even worse by how Frank tends to come to an almost complete halt when a zombie is nearby means you'll find yourself dying in ways that often that don't feel like your fault. It's another problem in itself when it comes to combat. I remember Dead Rising 3's combat feeling pretty smooth. I was able to break into a sprint, swing my weapon at a zombie and start running again in a completely natural way. This time around it feels like I have to come to a complete halt just to swing a weapon and then start moving again, which in turn breaks the flow and makes fighting zombies a little more tedious. The clunky melee is even more frustrating because it makes using firearms feel more effective, which goes against what the original Dead Rising was all about. Guns were for the lame. Grab a plank of wood and beat the nearest zombie over the head was Dead Rising 1's motto. Although one thing Dead Rising 4 does get right is the feeling of improvised combat. On quite a few occasions I found myself having to scramble and grab the first item to defend myself a lot more often than I remember in Dead Rising 3. But just like Dead Rising 3's Los Perdidos, Dead Rising 4's Willamette is completely forgettable in every single way. Even with the new version of Willamette Mall, it's still just boring. By focusing on larger environments, it feels as if the developers have lost sight of what made the original Dead Rising so memorable. Even before the release of the remaster, I still remembered a ton of details in Dead Rising 1's Willamette Mall. The innocence of it, how harmless music played in the background as I violently slaughtered zombies with a chainsaw. They've really taken a quantity over quality approach which hurts the game a lot. I'd rather have a smaller, more detailed environment than a bigger world that also features vehicles and other junk. So the boring open world and tedious story made for an experience that was pretty easy to put down when I finished it. And the multiplayer isn't much sharper either. They've taken the ideas behind the unexpected yet incredibly awesome Super Ultra Dead Rising 3 Arcade Remix Hyper Edition EX Plus Alpha DLC for Dead Rising 3. The premise is that 4 players team up to complete a series of objectives and win them all, minus the players cosplaying as other Capcom characters and using their skills and abilities. There's a few different episodes, but they're not all that interesting, and the dull gameplay makes the whole thing even more boring. Ultimately, Dead Rising 4 is almost what I expected. The story is tedious, the open world is boring, but this time even the gameplay falls short of the mark. It's a disappointing entry for what was otherwise a wonderfully unique franchise. Here's hoping that if Resident Evil 7 works out good, maybe they'll actually go back to Dead Rising's roots, because I'd much rather go back and play Dead Rising 1 with its garbage AI than play Dead Rising 4 again. At the end of this review, I'm awarding Dead Rising 4 2 out of 5. Oh, and the time limits the first and second Dead Rising games had were great, and anyone that disagrees should grow the